Pashas Tetzaveh. You already know that Pashas Tetzaveh speaks about the other part of the Mishkan, of the Beis Hamikdash. The first part is the building of the Mishkan, which is in Pashas Truma. The other part is about the Kohanim, the various garments of the Kohanim, how the Kohanim are to be prepared for the Avodah. There are two interesting inyonim points in Tetzaveh that immediately surface, come out, and ask for an explanation. Towards the end of the Pasha, which you didn't learn yet, you learned it last year, but this year you didn't learn it yet. It tells us about the building of the Mizbeach HaZohov, the second Mizbeach, the small Mizbeach. The big Mizbeach that was made on which there were about the Korbanos, that was mentioned and described in Pashas Truma. It would seem that all the kelim, all the vessels, all the pieces of the Mishkan should have been included in Pashas Truma. And yet, this one exception, that the Mizbeach HaZohov, the Mizbeach that was inside the Mishkan, so Mizbeach HaZohov, because it was covered with gold, much smaller Mizbeach, just one amud, square, and that one stood inside the Mishkan. That Mizbeach had very strict rules. You cannot put anything on the Mizbeach except for the Ktoiris. Twice a day Ktoiris, and then in Kippur the big Ktoiris. But that was it. And this Mizbeach is first mentioned in Pashas Tetzaveh, along with the description about the Kohanim. Another inyan about Pashas Tetzaveh you may be aware of. In Pashas Tetzaveh there is no mention of Moshe Rabbeinu's name, which is really the only one in the entire Torah after Moshe Rabbeinu's birth that his name is not mentioned in that portion. On the other hand, his name is not mentioned, but that does not mean that he himself is not referred to. He himself is very much referred to. As a matter of fact, he is referred to even by a greater, more significant, more direct reference than by name. He is referred to by the word Ato, you, which is even more than the name. You know, you're blocking somebody behind you, I think. You're not? Okay. You're blocking from me, not from you. So Moshe Rabbeinu is referred to by direct reference, you. Not only is it referred to him, but the very first word of the Sedra is Ato. The very first Sedra is Ato, is you, Moshe. And then that's referred to several times, Ato. So the Rebbe speaks about this, many Mefarshim speak about it, but the Rebbe speaks about it, and once the Rebbe picks something up, it gets a completely different perspective and different brightness. The Rebbe's explanation briefly, the Sikha itself you can learn in the Sikhas, I just want to discuss it for our purposes. This is actually the Baal HaTurim. Everybody, you may notice in the Chumoshim, there's a small pirush, in most Chumoshim, a pirush, in small letters, it's called Baal HaTurim. Baal HaTurim is the one who wrote the Tur. The Tur, who is the one before the Shulchan Aruch.
That's the Torah's commentary on the Chumash.
That's the Tur's Baal HaTurim, right? The Tur's commentary. I don't remember the exact story, but I know there was some kind of a challenge, and he wrote the whole Pirush in one night.
I've never even looked at it, so I can tell you how big or small it is, but regardless, I know that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's very, very incredible. It's not a question of big and small, it's the insight and the incisions. It's an amazing thing. Anyways, the Baal HaTurim points out that in this Pasha, Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned, and the reason for that is because later on in the next week's Pasha, in Pasha's Kisisa, when Moshe Rabbeinu was pleading with Hashem that he should forgive them for the sin of the Egel, for the golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu insisted that he should forgive them, because Hashem offered a different alternative. Hashem said, I'm going to wipe them off, and I'm going to make a new nation out of you. Moshe. And Moshe Rabbeinu stood very stubbornly and very strongly. He said, no, that's not acceptable. And he said, if you do not forgive them, then please take my name out of your Torah. And clearly Hashem did not accept that suggestion. So the Baal HaTurim says, nevertheless, since that Moshe Rabbeinu had uttered this type of a result, anything that a tzaddik utters ultimately takes hold, has an effect, and therefore it had an effect. The effect is that the Pashas Atat Tetzaveh is doesn't have Moshe Rabbeinu's name.
Why the Parsha before Kisisa is how we find
it? Right. That's a valid question. It should have been after. The point in this whole episode and how it was substituted with Ato Tetzaveh. As I mentioned before, Ato is a much deeper reference than the name. Name is an external thing to the person. When it came to pleading for Eden, that the Eden should be forgiven for the Ched HaEgel, Moshe Rabbeinu was ready to sacrifice everything about himself. Because the union of Torah it says, Moshe Mosor Atzmi Oleh, Moshe Rabbeinu had put his whole life into Torah. And yet, he was ready to sacrifice the whole thing. And he put his whole person into the saving this Yidden. And which Yidden was he so concerned about? Is it the Yidden who actually fell through in the Ched HaEgel? Ched HaEgel, which is the paramount sin, the ultimate sin, the worst of any of any failures that Eden went through. And Moshe Rabbeinu put his whole self on this. So this is the result of it. That since that Moshe Rabbeinu had sacrificed his name, but his very and with what power did he save the Eden? Not by his name, but by his own very essence. And this is referred to. This is illustrated in this Pasha Ve'ato. And in fact, this is the reason that this Pasha comes before the episode of the Egel, because this the Ato, the fact that there is the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu, this had to be first be demonstrated, had to be shown, and this power Moshe Rabbeinu was able later on to save the Eden from the Egel.
Similar like the idea of the refuah which comes before the
market. The refuah comes before the market, right.
Can you, I don't understand us again. What power he's get, from what he's get the power?
The ability of Moshe Rabbeinu to save the Eden from the Egel, that sinned in the Egel, was the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu, not even with his name, because without the Torah, which is representative of Moshe Rabbeinu's name, he couldn't have been saved. Without the Torah, they should have been destroyed. Moshe Rabbeinu, without his essence, was able to save them. This is why before that there is the parsha that demonstrates that Moshe Rabbeinu had actually put his essence into the Eden.
So this is the answer why this parsha is not mentioned.
Right. In other words, as much as Moshe Rabbeinu was imbued, into the Torah, his connection to the Torah is not incomparable to his connection to the Jewish people.
Comparable?
Doesn't compare. It's not.
Okay.
Right. His connection to the Jewish people is much deeper than his connection to the Torah. And that connection is expressed in the word Ato. That when it comes to the Jewish people, there is no name, there's no intermediate, there's no external thing, there is Moshe himself.
I'm still not sure I have the answer. Okay, I'm not sure, I'm still not sure I have the answer. What I understood from what you just said was that the reason why it came afterwards is because first I had to demonstrate Moshe's essence with the people, and then afterwards to show that now that's why they were saved.
That's right.
Okay.
What do we see in this parsha? How is this parsha Ata Tetzaveh so much related to Moshe himself and to his connection to the Jewish people? So first, we'll start from the end. The question that I mentioned before about the Mizbeach HaZohar, the small Mizbeach. The Mizbeach HaKtoiros, this Mizbeach that stood inside the Mishkan. On that Mizbeach, the Kohen would burn incense, the Ktoiros every day. In the Ktoiros, amongst the ingredients of the Ktoiros, was one ingredient called Chelbana. The Gemara says that the Chelbana is really has a negative smell. Usually the Tetzaveh is supposed to have a pleasant smell. The Chelbana has a very unpleasant smell. And the reason the Chelbana is included in the Tetzaveh is because the Chelbana represents the Rishonim.
The what?
The Rishonim. The Tetzaveh represent the Jewish people. And this is why, in fact, the Tetzaveh is done inside the Mishkan, not outside, because the Jewish people belong inside. And included in the Tetzaveh is Chelbana. And the Chelbana represents the Rishonim. In other words, a Yid and the significance and then the love, the depth with which a Yid is connected to Hashem, the truth of the Yid, transcends, goes beyond his actions, goes beyond his seichel. It is his very essence. And there is an interesting halacha that is actually derived from this union, that when Yidden get together to pray for special occasions, if Yidden, let's say, get together to pray because there is a lack of rain, when the Chacham used to go out and make fasts and go out and into the street and pray. So you have to make sure that amongst the people who are going with you in that crowd there is a shoy. If you don't have a Rasha, then you don't have a real Kohen. You didn't include the entire people. You're not representative of the Jewish people.
You need a Russia in your minion too?
I don't think we have that problem, mate.
I'm not asking.
I know you're not being facetious. The point is that there is no such thing as discriminating on a Yidden, no matter where he is. Nobody should misunderstand and say, okay, I volunteer.
The Elder Rebbe made it much easier to fill that quote.
That's right.
I think we need a Bainani in our minion.
We have one, Chaim.
This is really a phenomenal thing. And this is why this Mizbeach HaZohar, is mentioned in this Pashas Tetzaveh, not in Pashas Truma. Because in order to facilitate, everybody should know the way of facility right now, in order to make possible that should be a Mizbeach that will include the Rishoyim, that has to come not from Moshe Rabbeinu's name, that has to come from Moshe Rabbeinu himself, from his essence. And this Pasha represents Ato, Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And therefore this Mizbeach first came in this Pasha, because here is where this became possible. To make Torahs, that includes Chelbana.
I'm sorry, so what's the point that the Ata of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is necessary to connect the Rishayim to the Eivishter?
Right. Only by the power of Moshe Rabbeinu's essence can the Rishonim be included. And in order to have a Mizbeach HaZohar, you have to include that too. And this is also explains, if you learn the Pasha, you will see. I'm sure you learned the Pasha even in the very, very beginning. The first thing of the mitzvah of the Pasha, when it says Ve'ato, is the making of the oil for the menorah. That's the first mitzvah. The oil for the menorah, this is the highest in the neshama. In the neshama. In the neshama, you know there are many madrigas. and there is what's called water, it's called wine, this is the secrets. The oil, this goes beyond everything. This goes beyond the, even Yechida it's called, even Yechida. Yechida is also a name of the Neshama. But the Neshama itself is even deeper than Yechida. And that's represented with oil. And that's why in this mitzvah of preparing the mitzvah to prepare the oil for the menorah, and you know that the menorah represented the neshamas of the Jewish people. That's why there were 7 candles to represent the 7 different midas, 7 different types of neshamas. And that was, and also in the mitzvah of Be'ato, Moshe Rabbeinu himself had to be involved in this. It's not just a mitzvah from Moshe as a scholar, it's a mitzvah from Moshe himself.
Only Moshe could do it, you say.
Oh yeah. Similarly, the next mitzvah in this, of bringing Aaron or one of Aaron into the Avodah. So it says an interesting thing, I don't know how many of you noticed it. It says, I'm going to quote, if you don't understand the words, please ask me. Ve'ato ha'krei ve'ilecho esaharin ochicha. Hashem tells Moshe, you bring close to yourself Aaron, your brother, and his sons. What does it mean, bring close to yourself? Huh?
You should say, bring him close to me.
Yeah, bring him into Avodah. Bring close to yourself. Because this is not just a mitzvah to Aaron and his sons. This is a mitzvah that's possible only to be performed by Moshe himself. Moshe, as we all know, Moshe did not need special preparation for doing the Avodah. Did not need a special inauguration. Moshe was in a carrier all by himself. The nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu is of a different different level than all other nevi'im. The Torah later on itself, the Torah itself says that this is he's in a totally different category. Moshe did not need to be prepared to do the Avodah, but he was able to bring Aaron close to himself, and thereby imbue and give Aaron the koyach also to do the Avodah. Again, this is the principle that this Tetzaveh is representing Ato, Moshe Rabbeinu himself, rather than his name, which represents his capability and his koyches and so forth. So this is so much about the Sinyan in the Parsha. Primarily, I want to speak how this reflects itself. How do we understand it? What does Rishoyim have to do? Why is Rishoyim? Why are we making such a big fuss about Rishoyim? Rishoyim, who needs Rishoyim? I mean, the truth is, there shouldn't be any Rishoyim. Rishoyim will mitchem be tzaddik. But what is the inyan of Rishoyim? And in that itself, every one of us, every individual yid, has all the madregas. First of all, everyone himself can experience that sometimes he's a tzaddik, sometimes he's a beinani, and sometimes he's less than a beinani. And what is this whole inyan? Hashem has created such a Yetzer Hara that we, like the Alter Rebbe speaks in Tanya these days. I'm sure you're learning this. These are extremely significant and revealing of Prokim and Tanya. What the Alter Rebbe says in principle that when a person has to fight his Yetzer Hara, a person has a temptation. Temptation could be anything. Doesn't mean Chas v'Shalom he has a temptation to do something horrible. But anything that is not Kedusha, anything where he has to fight his Yetzer Hara, could be more severe and less severe. So the Alter Rebbe explains that we have to always remember that if you overcome that temptation, and you did not fall through and you did not do what you had the desire to do, then the benefit of that is not only that you didn't do the wrong thing. The benefit of that is that this fight is the greatest Avodas Hashem, the greatest service. This fight is a positive, not a negative. And it's not just avoidance of a negative action, but it actually has an extremely positive significance. This is called Avodas HaBirurim, where you mevarer. Avodas HaBirurim means that you go down to something which is very mixed up and very low, and through your avodah you show that no matter how low it is, it still connects to Hashem. You all heard, I'm sure, of this quote from the Gemara that Tetzaveh HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yisborech dira betachtoini. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants that the dira should be betachtoini. Tachtoini means in the lowest level. And this dira betachtoini, the Alter Rebbe explains, is really accomplished more by those people who are challenged by the Yetzer Hara than those people who are not challenged. And the Alter Rebbe explains even earlier, in the earlier program, Tetzaveh, Tezayin, that a person who is not challenged by the Yetzer Hara, because he's altogether not interested in Taivas Olam Hazeh, doesn't have an interest in it. So, and he's not doing any Avedas. And that person is called Lo Yavodoi. He's not an Oived Hashem. He's not doing any Avedas, but it's not Oived Hashem. Oived is one who actually has overcomes and his temptation, and he fights, he wages war. What is so significant? Okay, we can see that he wages war, so he is fighting it off. But why? And what is the significance of this dira betachtoini? Why go down? Why not stay a little bit higher? And you won't have the whole war. The Gemara says that Har Sinai, where the Torah was given, is called Sinai. The word Sinai is reminiscent to the word Sina, even though it's spelled a little bit different, but phonetically it's reminiscent to the word Sinai. Sina means hate. And the Gemara says, Mishom yordo Sina lo'elam. That there, Sina, hate, had come into the world. To be sure, there was plenty of evil and fighting before that.
That's like the birth of anti-Semitism, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But Mishom Yoda Sinaloyo. That Sinai, anti-Semitism, and this whole process that is now 3,500 years old, has started in Har Sinai. What is this? Abisha creates his world. It's his world. He wants the world, a peaceful world, a beautiful world. And he created a beautiful world, a glorious world. And then he himself goes and disturbs the peace, and he gives a Torah to one select nation, and Yoda Sina Lo'ilam, and creates havoc in his own world.
This happened when the Torah was given?
Yeah, I see.
There was no sinner before then?
I said there was Sina, but not in the
Institutionalized.
not in not in the level that you know, there was always Sina, there was always fighting, and like we learned right in Bereshis, the Milchama between the 4 Malachim and the 5 Malachim, all kinds of different things, but not something that they can that can be actually categorized, right, and put in perspective.
I don't understand the difference.
I'm sorry?
I don't understand the difference before Sina, before and after.
The Sina before and after? In simple terms, before the Sina was there was no basis for the Sina, there was no justification. Just jealousy. Just, I want your land. I want your wealth. I want to rule over you. But there was no really a difference, a categorical difference between one nation and another nation. Here, at Har Sinai was created a clear difference. There's the rest of the world, and there's the Jewish people. And this is something which is so clear, even in the Goyish world. They all know, and they look at the dictionary. There is the word Gentile. And what's Gentile?
Non-Jew.
Anyone who is non-Jew is called a Gentile. Who tells it? The Oxford Dictionary.
Amazing.
I have an Oxford Dictionary right here.
And that's like
Gentile?
Does it have to do with the fact that those ones were created as a people?
Gentile.
Or were we already a people before that, no?
No.
That doesn't have to do with that.
No, we were not a people before that.
Oh, we were. So
We were not. We were people at the Tzias Mitzrayim and culminating at Matan Sinai.
so does it have to do with that? Is that a
Yeah.
factor?
Yeah.
Anyone who is not Jewish.
it's amazing.
What's the definition of Jewish?
Anyone who's not Gentile.
What'd you say?
The definition of Jewish, anyone who's not Gentile.
That should be the definition.
So I want to discuss this phenomenon a little bit, and particularly how it pertains to us individually. There's an interesting thing that you all know, that even though we have supreme koiches, supreme qualities, we were blessed with supreme, very high, very very unique. We have the intellect. And the intellect, the other day we spoke about it, the intellect is really a gift, a godly gift that is given, that is exclusively the property of the human being. And we have emotions, and like we say, machshava dibur u'maiser, a whole huge a structure of 10 koiches and wonderful koiches. And yet, the bottom line, it says, ha'maisa hu ha'yikir. That the ikor means the core, the strongest, the base is the maisa, is the deed. And the reason for that, what's so special in the deed? So clearly, when you have a deed, you actually accomplish it, you actually express it, and so forth. But we want to go to the essence. What's so special in the deed? Why did Hashem want dafke the deed? Like we say, dira betachtoini. Every one of us having all our own koiches, perhaps I'll step back and give you a more simple illustration. We are sitting here in this room, and we are really aware of just these four walls and the ceiling and the floor. As far as we are concerned, that's the whole world. As long as the ceiling doesn't fall down and the floor doesn't sink, we're okay. But really, we're all at the same time aware that this room is not a room standing on its own. It's a room that's it's part of the street, part of this town, part of the city, part of this country, part of this world. And the real significance of this room is that we have identified a little space in this huge, beautiful world, which we can call, and this place is dedicated to learning. But if this same place, were someplace in space, in no man's land, it wouldn't have the same significance. Its significance, even though it's the same space, but really it is significant only because it is part of the entire world, part of the real creation, of the infinity of the world itself. Now, when the person has his intellect and he understands in his own mind certain ideas, certain rights and wrongs, as long as these ideas are in his mind or even in his heart, they are contained in this particular person, in this particular neshama. When does it become recognized that these are not ideas that are just in his mind, but that these ideas are true because of the creator of the world, because of the real truth, not because of his own preference, when it comes out in deed. Because when he comes out in deed, then it comes out of himself, and he recognizes that he himself is not just himself, but he's really part of the entire creation that God created.
When does it come out in deed?
In action. In outside. Indeed, he is expressing that he is not a separate entity, but that all the truths that he recognizes are really truths, not just his truth, but they are God's truth. The truths of the entire world. They are true.
On the connection of the room to that seed. I didn't catch it.
No. The analogy from the room is that we recognize that the value of this room is not the room, but the environment in which the room is present. Mm-hmm. Right? The same thing is in a person's life. What is the real value of anything in a person is not just his own mind, but the environment in which it is. Mm-hmm. Which means the godly presence in the world. And that is expressed in deed. That is expressed in deed. All right, this may be a little bit deep, and then there's not much time to go into details, but once having said that, we can just come to, so to speak, to the point of this. Hashem created the world. Such that really, from the perspective of the fact that the world was created by Hashem, it should be that as soon as somebody does something contrary to Hashem's will, he should cease to exist. Right? Because Hashem gives life to everything. If something is done contrary, if Rosh does something contrary to Hashem's will, since everything is dependent on Hashem, if does contrary to Hashem's will, then he ceases to exist. But that's not the kind of world that Hashem created. I mean, people do all kinds of wrongs and they continue to exist. What's the point in this? The point is that Hashem created a world. Yes, truly the world is dependent on Him, but He created a world that should be so complete that it should be an entity unto itself, and it should not be blatantly, openly dependent on Him, so that the world can choose its own path. The world can choose its own way. You can go one way, you can go another way, and you can accomplish anything you want. What is the ultimate accomplishment in that? The ultimate accomplishment in that is that ultimately, in the long run, through the worldly process itself, it will be recognized what the good is and what the truth is. In other words, it should be recognized not just because we understand it intellectually, not just because because Hashem forces it, but the world itself, from its own path, from its own mistakes, should come and recognize where the truth is. So that the Yetzer Hara that Hashem has put into people, which we're all very angry about, but this Yetzer Hara, this is what completes the person. So that when he does a mitzvah, when he does a good deed, then it's obvious that he's doing a good deed not because he has got no choice, but because he recognizes the true value of God, the true value of good. When will he be able to recognize that? Only if he has the option to do otherwise. So that, on the one hand, a Rasha is a Rasha. And similarly, a Yetzer Hara is evil. Yetzer Hara is evil, there's no question about it. But we have to understand that this Yetzer Hara that we are fighting, this is what makes the good real good. This is what makes us real people. This is not just an unintended. This is what makes us real people. This is what the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya these days. That there is a nachas ruach l'mayla from fighting of the Yetzer Hara. Not just he shouldn't be, but the fighting him off. Because that expresses the recognition that in the place where there is a Yetzer Hara, if there is no Yetzer Hara, there isn't. But in the very place where there is a Yetzer Hara, what do I want? I wanted the good, not the Yetzer, not the bad. Okay.
So what this connection to the sinner?
The sinner is the giving of the Torah in this world. Why did the Rebbe disturb the peace in the world? Because this is the means by which the real good comes to the world.
So anti-Semitic is good?
What?
Anti-Semitic is good?
I'm sorry?
Anti-Semitic is good?
Anti-Semitism is not good. Absolutely. Just like Yetzer Hara is not good.
But in insults?
But in the that anti-Semitism brings out the special quality that is in the Jewish people.
They're not like everybody.
It brings out the special quality, and it brings out the special quality that they will sustain and they will overcome it. And ultimately, the whole world will turn around and recognize that this is where the truth is. This is the famous word that you read in the Hayoim Yoim, where the Baal Shem Tov said that Chamoy Seinacha, that the Chomer Haguf is Seinacha, the Guf is your enemy, because it doesn't let you do Torah mitzvahs, and it makes you lazy, and it fights against you. So you should know that this enemy, Seinacha, that he is your enemy, and you hate him. You should know that your greatest accomplishment is to work with him. Even though this takes you away from the higher level of avodah that you could be, and yet to bring out the real truth, it is only through that. And this is where, I don't know to what extent I was able to bring it out. This is where the idea of this room with the world comes together. That in the fight with the Yetzer Hara, this is where we recognize Hashem's presence. Without the Yetzer Hara, we don't recognize Hashem. We don't recognize, I like this. This is pleasant, this is beautiful. When do we have to employ, when do we have to use our Avodas Hashem? When do we have to use our recognition of Hashem's presence? When do we have to use our Abba V'yira, our fear of Hashem and Abba for Hashem? Not when we do something pleasant, something that we enjoy. It is when we have to fight with the Yetzer Hara. It is when we have to fight with our Rosha, with the Rosha that's inside us. And this is why the Rosha should not be excluded, because the Rosha within us is what ultimately brings out from us our godly power, our Avos Hashem and our Yiras Hashem. When a Yid is tempted, a Yid has a Nisoyin, and he reminds himself of that moment. But you're a Yid, and you have a Torah, and you have and Hashem is watching you, and you want to be with Hashem, you don't want to break away from Hashem, and as a result of that, he does not do this mistake. This is the greatest moment in his life. This is the greatest moment in his life. This is when he is really elevated. This is when he really connects with Hashem. When you learn some davos, it's only a preparation for that. The real moment when he recognizes Hashem's presence in his life, in the world, is when he's confronted with an Yisrael. When he has to do what he doesn't, when he cannot do what he doesn't like, or he has to do what he likes. Moshe Rabbeinu has put his life on the line, his whole greatness on the line, for the sake of the Rasha. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who recognized, and he gave us the strength that we should be able to overcome with all of our obstacles. The deepest Rasha that's hidden someplace in our stomachs, we should be able to overcome. And we should be able to remember the koyah that Moshe Rabbeinu has given us with Ato, with his own self. As it, in fact, that it says that Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who bequeathed, who is given, who has inherited the Jewish people. That particular koyah is called Moyach Hadas. Moyach Hadas means the factual recognition of Hashem's presence. Not just understanding, but the factual recognition of Hashem's presence. This is Moshe Rabbeinu's gift.
What does it mean, factual?
Factual means real, practical. Like I said, even at the level of deed, something external, you still recognize that that's the way it is. Not what you understand in your mind, but that which is the reality of the world itself.
This Moshe Rabbeinu gives us.
Yeah. And this is why Moshe Rabbeinu, he is the one who accepted Rishoy, who stood for Rishoy. Not Chashashov that one has to be Mahadar to be a Rosh, but one has to understand that the evil, or the evil inclination, or the nisyonis that we go through, instead of getting angry at ourselves, we have to be encouraged and take on strength and overcome it. Because they are there for a good reason. With overcoming these nisyones, we become much, much higher, much more strong, much more real. And our recognition of Hashem's presence in our lives and in the world becomes much real. Because one can hide in his little cubicle, nobody sees him except for Hashem. And if he recognizes that he is always with Hashem, and that everything that he does directly relates to Hashem's presence, there is no greater avodas Hashem than that. This is the Rosha within us. The Rosha within us will come and say, forget it, nobody sees. Nobody sees. If nobody sees, then it didn't happen. And then you Yetzer Tov and your wise guy, and then the wise, your wisdom comes and says, but I fear Hashem, and I don't want to break away from Hashem. To say that nobody sees is the same thing. This is what the moshel from the, I don't know to what extent this was able to help you, but the moshel of this room. It's like flying off in this room into open space. Is that a place to live? You want to live in the world. You want to live in Hashem's world. There was an episode during the time when the Russians were shooting off astronauts. So there was astronauts. You know what astronauts?
Astronauts.
Cosmonauts, astronauts. America intercepted a communication between astronauts and the Russian and the control tower. And they couldn't know for sure because it was an intercepted communication, but it seemed that they shot up these astronauts and they were not able to bring him back. They were not able to bring him back. But it was never substantiated. I don't remember whether it was, but this was a big suspicion because it sounded like the communication was indicated that. Okay. Which is the biggest tragedy for a human being. So I asked someone one time, what's so tragic? Let's say they have oxygen to last them for 100 years. And let's say they have food rations that will last them for 100 years. What are they missing? Right? This is the same as saying, nobody sees me. Nobody sees me means to be disattached, disengaged. To be in this space capsule. Nobody sees me. What kind of life? Is there a source, a moment of happiness? Is it conceivable that they can have a moment of happiness in that capsule? Nobody sees me is exactly that. Chas v'sholom, if one would perceive for a moment that in fact nobody sees him, it would be tragic. It would be tragic. Nobody really thinks that. They think that Hashem sees me, but Hashem doesn't mind. Hashem is a good, kind God. He'll understand, but nothing else. To see that he doesn't see him, that would be tragic. What's mean? That means I'm alone in the world. What kind of life is this? So we are seen, and we want to be seen. And if the Yetzer Hara tells us, come on, nothing happens, we know that it's not true, that this breaks us away from Hashem. This is the pshat, that even the Chelbono goes into Koche Koch. Chelbono is part of the Kteiros, and the Kteiros was made in Koche Koch. Because ultimately this brings out the best. Until we recognize that we'll never, don't even think the possibility that nobody sees us. It will be mind-boggling. It should have a joyous journey through this and conquer every battle. Be victorious in every battle. Then we win the war. Once we win the war, the Beis Hamikdash comes right down.
Amen.